Every woman deserves to feel vibrant, safe, loved, and feel her power. The Woman's Vibrancy Code podcast is here for a potent use of your time. We will cover energy, hormones, and libido with episodes that also dive into entrepreneurship, money mindset, feminine power, and much, much more. Introducing Maraya Brown, Yale and functional medicine trained women's health expert, midwife, mom, and entrepreneur.
Hey, Women's Vibrancy Code podcast listeners, Maraya Brown here. I am bringing to you a repurposed interview that I did with Beyond the Red Tent a few years back. This was an interview I honestly felt starstruck. Elena Tonetti is someone who has had tremendous impact on me personally, as well as my career as a midwife. She is a Russian midwife, the one that made the documentary Birth as We Know It. If you are someone who is thinking about getting pregnant, you are pregnant, holy macaroni, it is absolutely worth a watch. Grab the link in the show notes. She has had a tremendous impact on families around the globe from the perspective of preparation for birth, but also rebirth, because the reality is all of us, whether you want to accept it or not, have experienced some aspect of trauma during our pregnancy, birth, or during those initial hours, minutes, days that we were out of the womb. And her work on the planet has been profound. I'm grateful to know her. I'm blessed by her presence. And I hope that you really enjoy this interview. If you know anyone who does work in the birth world, whether they're a doula or a midwife or pregnant, wanting to become pregnant, doing any rebirth work in feminine energy, please share this episode with them. Elena really does work around the globe that is worth sharing with the world. And hopefully you enjoy this interview. Maraya Brown here, and I have the esteemed honor, and when I say honor, it makes me feel emotional, to interview Elena Tonetti. She started the movement that's called Birth into Being. Elena Tonetti Vladimirova, I don't speak Russian, I'm sure you'll correct me, Elena, is an internationally renowned pioneer of conscious evolution, serving the birthing field since 1982. She was instrumental in organizing the birth camps in the Black Sea in Russia, where women gave birth in the presence of wild dolphins. Elena is the creator of the critically acclaimed revolutionary documentary Birth as We Know It, which was in 2006. Birth into Being, which has been in existence since 1999, and How Dreams Come True in 1995. She is a spiritual midwife to thousands of people, perfecting her Birth into Being method for over 34 years. She trains facilitators who are now using it in 28 different countries in all major languages. Elena is featured in the recently released UN-sponsored book, Force Such as the World Had Never Known, Women Creating Change. And she was featured as one of the 30 most influential grassroots women in the world. She was recently nominated for a Living Legacy Award, along with Deepak Chopra and Christiane Northrup. And to learn more, you can go to birthintobeing.com, and we'll make sure to put down at the bottom for you to connect with her more. I just have to say, when I was in my midwifery training at Yale, I was finished in 2007. And so right before that is when Birth as We Know It launched, this documentary. And I can say that watching the documentary literally changed the trajectory of my midwifery career. It was so instrumental. And I had 3 ecstatic home births, and I feel like a lot of it goes back to watching that documentary and the images. And yes, I was in midwifery training, and yes, I was training with midwives in Central America and Africa and Hawaii, and I have a deep trust in birth. But what Elena brings to the world of pregnancy and childbirth and helping women in that journey is just over the top. So then to start, if there are women listening to this that are thinking about becoming pregnant, or they are pregnant and they're thinking about planning their birth, where would you start in helping them along that journey, and what advice would you offer them?
That would take another half an hour. Okay, so where do we start? First of all, in my estimation, a woman would need to assess her space, really take a good look where she is with that pregnancy. Does she really want it? Is the father of her babies on the same page? Is it a good time? Is there something that is holding her back from being ecstatically happy about that? Because we all know the condition of our world and we have our own battles and struggles. So it's not like, oh, I'm pregnant and it's ecstatic happiness instantly. It's a very complex notion because a woman has to go through basically identity crisis at some point when she realizes that now she is not the center of the universe, that there is two of them, and that pretty soon it will be just the baby that will become the center of her universe. And all of that information is instantly there. So her identity needs to go through major rearrangement, which is actually very supported by all the hormones, all the anatomical lucidity that the pregnant body goes into. So there is a lot of support, but also there is a lot of socioeconomic ingredients in this equation. So basically, the number one thing is to estimate the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual condition into which this baby is arriving, and then go from there. Because roughly on the scale from 0 to 10, if I'm at 10, then just sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. If you are at 2, then we need to really investigate why it's not a 10. What is in the reality? And this is a very big and complex soul-searching journey because the 2 can be coming from so many different angles. It can be coming from her own birth trauma, first of all, because pregnancy activates a woman's own birth trauma. If she herself was not born well, that's going to come into the front line. And it could be that she's even really happy emotionally. Her heart is in the right place. Her mind is in the right place. And the timing is right. And everybody's happy about it. But her body might be freaking out about it. Her body might be going like, I don't know anything about giving birth. I don't know how to do it. Oh my God, what happens to my waistline? What about... what about my yoni? How is it going to happen? Because if she was born with C-section, that whole part of her brain that was supposed to be activated during her own birth to channel that information. Okay, this is what a woman knows about giving birth. This is how it's done. And if that moment was completely wiped out from her nervous system, from her limbic system, from her reptilian system, from her physiology, because the mother was drugged and she was drugged. So that information did not come through. So her body literally has the missing software that doesn't know how to process that experience. And she might be in a state of deep numbness that goes way straight into the origins of her. That's very big piece to deal with. Then it could be if she was even born well, but then her parents, for example, were fighting during pregnancy. Then there is basic settings in your nervous system because the baby absorbs all the mother's hormonal cocktail through the amniotic fluids. It's when the baby is bathing in that soup and registers that hormonal cocktail in the womb. The message that the nervous system is getting is the deep conflict between the desire to own a body and a deep, deep quintessential hesitation and uncertainty and just confusion about what does it mean to own a body? What does it mean to be born? And that is a very deep conflict that goes into the basic settings of the newborn girl. So she's coming through this turmoil with, should it be okay for me to exist or not? And if that quintessential question is not resolved, if she is harboring this deep resentment towards being alive, it's really difficult to give life to something else. And not even only just a baby, but her projects, her creative expressions, her expressing herself as a woman, as a human being. And like, it's hard to even love somebody fully from that place if you harbor that deep resentment to being alive. So you see what I mean? It's a very complex situation that we go through, dealing with all those layers of our existence that normally we don't really even think about, don't even talk about those things. And it's kind of in the blind spot of our mass consciousness. So I'm sure that women that are listening to your program are not part of mass mentality, that they are looking for answers, and that's why they're finding them. And it's very, very important to ask yourself right questions so the answers could be received in the proper place in our system.
Wow, I have so many questions.
Go for it.
Okay, so one of the things I'm hearing is when a woman becomes pregnant, consciously, and much of it is unconscious, she is from that moment of conception reliving her own experience of conception, her own experience of what it was like when she was in the womb. And that inevitably starts bubbling up and churning. And it's a phenomenal time to ingest, digest, and work through that for the sake of the pregnancy, for the sake of this being that is now growing in a new womb and a new reality, and reset that. And so if a woman says, yes, I'm ready to dive and work through my own history so that I can reset my own history, and also for the ancestral lineage that we're panning forward to reset it for that baby that's currently growing, where does a woman start?
Exactly. Given that part of that equation is also activated birth trauma of her partner, of the father of the baby, because it works for him exactly the same way. If he was not born well, just her part of the deal, if he's going to be present at birth, then he will bring all of his anxiety to this. So it's not only her scale of deficiencies, but it's also his, plus both sets of parents. And siblings and best friends, whoever is involved, it all plays the part. And if you're asking yourself a question, why do we have such high rates of C-section right now? If birth is such a natural, part of our life, embedded into our system by whatever force created our bodies in the first place, logically speaking, we couldn't have been just missing that big piece. Every species on this planet has embedded ability to procreate normally, naturally. Why would human beings, such an important part of the ecosystem of this planet, would be missing that, right? So we're supposed to have as part of our makeup, but we introduced the stress level that none of other species really possess, because we have cortex, because we have memory. We can hold on to what happened to us, and by holding on to, we keep recreating that basically every day. We keep running in circles. Knowing history doesn't seem to prevent it from happening again, because see, we have 250 wars around us. Who needs it? Who wants it? Do we know anybody who needs that? But it's perpetual. In every millennia, in every country, there is that violence of humans against humans. And that is exactly the piece that runs into our personal story and in our collective story and in the story of our ethnic group. It's all tied together, our kind of bound spiral, but we don't spiral if we are contracted. We're just running in circles. We're stuck in one place. So what needs to happen is really to look at our trauma. When a woman finds out that she's pregnant, she needs to really do a private detective work of her state of being, whether there is sexual trauma, because sexual trauma is a very big piece of developing possible complications at birth, which is already on top of the birth trauma, the possible, if she was raped or disrespected in her sexuality, that kind of doesn't allow her yoni to have that flood of oxytocin that is necessary for birth. So there's so many bits and pieces that I would really encourage the listeners to go to deeper research of this subject. So birth trauma, sexual trauma, emotional trauma, relational trauma, if there is big conflict, situational conflict around the baby, if it's not the right father of the baby, not the right timing, not the right circumstances, all of that can be neutralized. That's the thing. If anything I learned is that 99.8% of possible complications at birth can be prevented. That's a very bold statement, but I'm doing this work for 37 years already, and I'm observing some patterns. So we're very suggestive. If we're telling ourselves a story that birth is scary, it is scary. If we open up that door and start telling ourselves that there is something we can do to shift ourselves from being terrified of birth to a place of confidence and capacity for the highest ecstasy that birth can offer, because literally when that flood of oxytocin happens, that our anatomy allows and actually calls for, that's the thing, that our anatomy calls for that flood of oxytocin that opens a woman and sends her through the roof. It's the ultimate high. There is no drug on this planet that can give that kind of high, or that high of high that the birth can do. But for that to happen, we need to remove the habit of adrenaline, that adrenaline that closes the cervix. So see, our brain either produces the stress hormones or the love hormones. It can't do both at the same time. So we need to use whatever time we have before the due date to train our nervous system for the highest production of oxytocin we can possibly have at the moment. And again, that's a tricky task, because if we lived all our life in a habit of stress, if we're running on adrenaline for years and years and years, if we were born into that, if the mother and grandmother and all lineage was running on adrenaline, how are we supposed to even know what oxytocin is? Because we don't even have a reference point for that. Because literally the oxytocin production can dry up and fall off. It's like everything in the body, use it or lose it. And if we constantly live on adrenaline, we literally lose the ability to produce sufficient amount of oxytocin, serotonin, melatonin. This is why sleep disorders and depression and all that fun stuff is so prevalent, because our ability to produce oxytocin is kind of in the all-time low collectively right now. So with that in mind, there is your homework, pregnant mama. Pleasure.
Go find pleasure. And I imagine it's not just for pregnant women. That message is for all women to be reminded of the beauty of pleasure, finding the things that we feel satisfied with, finding the things we feel joy about, and allowing pleasure to bubble up from within us so that it creates more, and finding the ways to do the self-care and the self-repair to minimize the stress that we experience. Do you have suggestions of where women can go through pregnancy and how they can tap into finding the pleasure?
Well, first of all, they need to know to start looking for it, that to go on a search, like what really gives me pleasure. And it's not the kind of pleasure that the chocolate brings or talking with a girlfriend, which is good, but it's external. I'm talking about the going deep inside, and basically what has the capacity to offer that connection with our inner reserves is deep, deep stillness, silence, breath, and you kind of build that muscle, like any muscle in our body, that we can't just start lifting really heavy things. We have to build it slowly. And that ability to connect with that which sustains us from the inside is the most critical moment, when no matter what happens around, I just go into my core and I know that I'm safe, that I am directly, intimately connected with the source of me, whatever name you have for that supreme intelligence that is so much bigger than our little, monkey mind or our little rat race. We're constantly, we can't get out of it. There is always water to be carried and wood to be chopped, just do. But then there is a moment when we connect with something that I don't want to name because you might have different name. And in that moment of stillness, you build your trust in yourself, in your life, in your connection with that life. And from that place, you create new life. Because if you're not connected, if you're feeling small and separated, it's very difficult to create something. That creation will then reflect that separation. You see, if you want to create something magnificent, it needs to come from that place of magnificence in the core of you that is there. The fact that you're alive means that there is connection. Because without that connection with the source of life, you wouldn't be breathing and sitting and listening to me right now. It's there. And we can ignore it. We can pave over it with all kind of busy mind. But it's there. And we have the remote control. So the moment we decide to remember that we have that remote, that we have that free will that is mentioned in every scripture of every tradition around the world, right? That thing, free will, what is it? We're missing the instructions. We're missing the training of exercising our free will because our trainers didn't know that they have it. Their trainers didn't know. It's kind of a disowned part of the package, but it's still the part of the package. So we can really snap out of that mass hypnosis that we don't have any power, that we're separated and helpless, and grab that remote control and really connect with our incredible strength and our incredible resourcefulness and ability to mend and being resilient and being part of something much bigger than our little story. So this is where we start. This is just the beginning. How do we connect is just the memory of being part of the connective tissue, that there is no separation, just there is that memory inside. And what needs to happen is tapping into that boundless source of love. It's literally coming to that. It's that state of love, of availability for love that gives all the answers. It's kind of funny. Love is the answer. It's so corny, but it is true. It is true. Love for yourself. Mm-hmm. And not just in a way that, I'm going to go get myself a new dress. Yes, you go ahead and get yourself a new dress. But that's like cherry on top. The real love for yourself is the listening to yourself, the ability to give yourself space to breathe, to eat what really feels right. Not what's in front of you or what's on the menu, but just really listen to your body. What does it want? And go play, go in the woods, go hike, look into someone's eyes and really connect, really allow yourself to be seen and seeing them. It's kind of that kind of pleasure. Take a bath, take a sun bath, whatever is available. The love that allows you to honor this amazing temple. Somebody asked me in one of the interviews, actually in many interviews, I'm being asked, what advice would you give to your younger self? And that's the one. Take better care of your body. The body is so exquisite. It's such an incredible privilege to own the body at this point. If we put together all the improbability of having a body, technically everything we know about making the body, there shouldn't be any bodies. It's such a complex, just mind-blowingly improbable process that happens against millions of odds. How does it work? We don't know anything about it. We know all the stages, we know what it looks like, but what actually goes on there, we're absolutely are not able to comprehend. Like, what makes the cell to divide? How does it find the womb? How does it attach? Like, what's going on in there? How is it opens up for that little sperm that is so tiny and basically helpless by the time he found her? And she has a membrane that is the most impenetrable wall in the three-dimensional universe. The membrane of the egg is absolutely impenetrable. It's designed that way to protect her to protect all the computer that inside her, all the DNA inside her, to protect from all the infections and blah, blah, blah. So how does that tiny, soft little sperm gets in? What's going on between them? How does she know to open up to that one and take him in and surrender to him and cease to exist, basically, in order to create you? The pure miracle of creation. There is nothing short of miraculous. The way we're being made, the way our bodies make our children. So we have to quit taking it for granted and taking birth out of the context of the story of our family, of the lineage of all the women behind us, the mother, the grandmother. We're so fragmented now. We're so disconnected in that lineage for many reasons, for the unbelievable stress level that we've created for ourselves, because we keep being programmed on separation, generation after generation. This is exactly how humans knew for thousands of years that if you take the wild animal, you can't make it serve you. That animal has to be born and raised in the prison-like environment in order to make them do what we want, right? So this is basically just one tiny step to doing this to humans. So what we're raising our hand against is that we are standing up. We're deciding not to program our children on being slaves and soldiers. We're deciding to recall our divinity, reclaim our power, really. Again, that sounds corny, and that sounds like the pep talk you hear now from every channel, but it really is what it comes down to claim our ability to love, to claim our ability to be loved.
So let's say a woman is pregnant and really finding pleasure in reclaiming and doing the personal work to allow herself to be loved and do the quiet time and the self-care. And maybe there's a husband, there's a mom, there's a friend, a sister around her on a regular basis. Maybe even they want to be there at the birth and they're not necessarily meeting her in that same journey. What piece of advice do you give to that woman as she is trying to, and maybe even to the obstetric provider too? I don't know if you want to take the conversation there, but just at least the advice to the woman. How does she protect that bubble while still allowing her tribe and her community to support her in the best way that they know how? Because we can't do it alone. So what does a woman do in that scenario?
Yes. Well, we're talking about many different layers, right? Because one thing is the birth. Another thing is the support during pregnancy and postpartum support. So there are many different ways. But the thing is that when a woman goes into that place of deep connection with her higher self, that question doesn't even arise how to handle them. It's kind of happens organically and very easy from that place to look straight in the eye of somebody who is bringing their chaos into her space and just have a conversation. And from the place of loving, healthy boundaries, there is no other option but the boundaries would be respected. It's just, I love you very much and I need your support, but I am in this space that I'm very vulnerable and I have to take care of my child and of the process. So if you are not interested in neutralizing your own chaos, we can't have it. And we can do it together. Like I am working on that piece for myself, for my baby. Do you want to do it together? If it's a sister, if it's a good friend, it's much harder with the mother, of course, because with the mother, we all go into, the existing dynamic very easily. But then actually a lot of women that I know were not informing their mothers about their process, their progress, about their choices, not even telling them when they went into labor, because they didn't want to bring that energy, that panic, that anxiety into the baby's space. So basically the advice is, if they can do it together. If they're not able to, then you just kind of create a bubble and don't invite them into that space. Mm-hmm. It's like, what are your priorities? Is it more important to create social status, support social status with somebody, or make sure that your birth is not being interfered with?
Just to finish this piece up, talk a little bit about artwork, dance, being in water, and the role of that.
Well, you see, our creativity reflects our inner world and how we express ourselves and what is the final product, whether it's dance or poem or book or garden, what is it, will reflect our inner conflict or the space of connection with life and with ourselves. And it would be appreciated by those who are resonating with that space from which that art comes from. You see what I mean? Like, take example, Picasso. It's a really fragmented view of the world, very distorted, that reflects his incredible pain and his horrific history of his childhood, his relationship with his family. It's like the end result was his art that is being resonated with by hundreds of millions of people who are also viewing the world from that distorted place caused by the misery they were exposed to, during their formative period. So whatever we express is telling us, showing us where we are. So you can really communicate with yourself. You draw something and look at it, like really look at it, where it's coming from. What is it telling me about myself, where I am, the way I move, the way I speak to others and to myself. It's all about that. Our expression is a way of communicating. And sometimes in the artwork or poetry, we learn more about ourselves than we tell ourselves, the conscious story that we keep repeating. I am this and this, that's what happened. For healing, we always need to go beyond the story, beyond the point where the story began, because that's where the answers are. The story is, okay, the narration doesn't carry the healing. Mm-hmm. What we need is to unravel the point where we allowed that story to kind of spring roots into our nervous system, where we took it. And there was no option, because as a baby, we can't really object or discern whether I want that story or not. So we just accepted it. But we're not our story. We're really not what happened to us. We're so much bigger. We're so much more powerful than anything that happened to us. Mm-hmm. And we can really draw that part of, I'm not my story.
I love Brene Brown calls it our silly first draft. Well, really, she says shitty, but I didn't want to, we call it our silly first draft.
Right. There is a me that has that story. But if I actually bring the me that has the story, the me has the power to neutralize the negative impact of the story.
Mm-hmm. So we have so much more to talk about, and I'm realizing just watching the time, and so I think this is a nice place to round out. I'm looking forward, moving forward, to talking a little bit more around infertility, bereavement, miscarriage, and also specifics with your workshops of what do we do with that trauma. So I just want to thank you for your time once again. You can visit birthintobeing.com, the documentary Birth as We Know It, and then we'll post down below resources and ways to follow Elena and continue the process that Elena is suggesting. So I just want to really honor you and thank you for your time. And I'm looking forward to what comes next.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Woman's Vibrancy Code. Connect with us and take the first step to transforming your energy, hormones, and libido at thewomansvibrancycode.com. Cheers to your zest and vitality. Make sure to follow for weekly power-packed value.